Afghanistan, a scarred nation devastated by war, hatred, and destruction. Countless have died in the U.S.-Afghanistan conflict. Much blood has been shed on this soil. U.S. soldiers, Afghan soldiers, as well as innocent Afghan civilians. Many lives have been ruined from injury, drug addiction, and economic devastation. Distressed mothers mourn the death of their children.
The task at hand for the U.S. in Afghanistan is undoubtedly end the war. However, the procedure to complete this task is a major issue, as some feel the war isn't over while others desire a swift end to this 11-year conflict. Furthermore, to truly understand this issue, one must look at the history that has led us to today.
From the early 20th century until the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Afghan society developed with democracy, human rights, and economic progression due to U.S. assistance. In 1978, however, the revolution by the Afghan communists and the Soviet invasion ended this era of prosperity and triggered an ongoing era of turmoil and bloodshed. To combat the communist threat, the U.S. provided financial aid to the Mujahideen groups, some of who joined together as the strict Taliban and a few others as the Al-Qaeda.
Of the Taliban because what?
He was in Afghanistan 17 years before we existed. Such people were instigated to go to Afghanistan and fight the Soviet Union. And such people were called the heroes of independence, not by us. Such people were called the heroes of independence by the President of the United States, by Mr. Ronald Reagan. And all of a sudden, they have changed to terrorists.
However, soon after a few years of civil war, the Taliban took power of the nation, and while they reunited their torn nation and had an effective opium ban for a year, they took many human rights away from their people and viciously enforced their strict regime based on their interpretation of their religion, Islam.
It was very hard to control yourself to do not cry. They were beating people always. Every single tree was burned. Every single house was damaged. That's what they were doing with Afghans.
Taliban. Some, when they're thinking of the Taliban, they're thinking,
I am for free press, fair elections, and equal rights for women. I can't say that.
Indeed, the Taliban's inhumane policies were unacceptable and led to the formation in 1996 of the United Front led by the Lion of Afghanistan, Shah Massoud. Massoud, considered a hero for his activity in the Soviet war, detested the Taliban's inhumanity and sought American assistance to defeat them. The United Front was completely against terrorism and sought a proper democracy. However, Massoud's death 3 days before 9/11 from an Al-Qaeda attack led to the end of the United Front until its reformation 10 years later by his younger brother. Shah Massoud is now considered one of the greatest heroes in Afghanistan history. With his death, many feared the Taliban were in complete control.
However, the Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group led by Osama bin Laden that masterminded the 9/11 attacks and found protection in Afghanistan by the Taliban. The Al-Qaeda was completely focused on international extremism, unlike the Taliban. However, they still received protection by the Taliban while in Afghanistan. By denying the U.S.'s request to hand over Osama, the Bush administration began an invasion to defeat the Taliban. Within a year, the Taliban were taken out of major cities with vicious attacks that resulted in many civilians' deaths. However, Taliban survivors still remain.
The president told his generals to unleash holy hell.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
From then, the U.S. government left the issue of stabilizing Afghanistan to the new, yet corrupt and inefficient Afghan government led by Hamid Karzai. While Taliban forces began to restructure, the U.S. began to focus on the Iraq War in 2003. By 2005, Taliban insurgency began in the southern parts of Afghanistan, and the U.S. realized stabilizing the nation torn by war since 1978 won't be easy. Finally, in 2008, under the Obama administration, the U.S. launched a new, bigger offensive with more troops to focus on providing Afghanistan with a stable government and deal with Taliban insurgency. In 2011, the U.S. achieved a big victory by killing the man who caused the war, Osama bin Laden. However, the Karzai administration remains dominated by corruption and inefficiency, unable to stop drug trafficking or provide Afghanistan with a stable government.
As far as public opinion goes, most U.S. and international citizens desire a swift end to the war and do not wish to be part of a hard, expensive, and risky rebuilding process of stabilizing Afghanistan.
The issue now remains on what is necessary procedure to end this war. Karzai explains that his government will be able to handle the Taliban until 2024. While the U.S. and Britain are proposing removing the troops as early as 2014, and only leaving their special forces units and trainers to help train the Afghan army, and leaving the issue of stabilizing that nation to the Karzai government, with already as much money and effort spent on this 11-year war. Another pressing issue in the Afghanistan conflict is the drug trafficking of the cash crop called opium. Many corrupt officials in the Karzai administration also take their share in it, and many wonder whether America can trust such a corrupt government and how to proceed further.
که تو میکشی مواد مخدر نام از چی است که تو از استفاده میکنی؟ هیروین ها. روزی چند دفعه ایره میکشی؟
The U.S. will not be done with this war until they feel the Afghan government can support itself. Obama is supposed to have troops out of Afghanistan by the end of 2014, while some desire an even swifter removal, and others, such as Karzai, feels he cannot support Afghanistan against the Taliban and suspicious Pakistan without U.S. support. Furthermore, with an increasing deficit for the U.S. and the reformation of the United Front led by the line of Afghanistan's younger brother, some question whether it's in the U.S. interest to continue fighting this expensive and devastating war for Afghanistan. With the nation torn by 34 years of war since 1978, Afghanistan craves true peace and stability. Yet, the U.S. must consider what procedures in its best interest, taking into account the expenses, U.S. lives, efficiency of the U.S. strategy, and whether it's also in the best interest of Afghanistan. Truly, the end of the U.S.-Afghanistan conflict is not completely clear. However, it's clear that the procedure necessary to complete this task must be thought carefully and take into account what procedure is the best interest of the prosperity of all the parties involved in this conflict.